There's a type of person who speaks about love more clearly than anyone else. What devotion means, they understand. What waiting means, they understand. How to write vows that move people to tears, he knows best of all. But why is it that someone who writes with such profound emotion can't hold on to a real relationship? Today's story might give you an unexpected answer. All that deep affection, every single word of it, was real. It's just that he kept all those words for the people on the page. In 1963, at his desk at Mingpao, Jin Yong put pen to paper and wrote, "Azu is Azu, across all lands and nations, through 1,000 autumns and 10,000 generations. There is only one Aju. How could 1,000, 10,000 beautiful Han women ever replace her? In this life, I shall never marry again." This was Xiao Feng's blood-soaked vow. It was also the highest myth Jin Yong ever created in the martial arts world. That year, he was 39 years old. When he wrote those words, his wife Ju Mei was carrying a lunchbox, pushing through the crowds and smoke of Kowloon, squeezing onto the ferry, opening the door of the newspaper office, and placing the hot meal in front of him. Just 3 years later, in Quarry Bay, Hong Kong, a weary, middle-aged man, his face weathered and worn, pushed open the door of a restaurant. The 16-year-old waitress in the restaurant saw his dejected state and walked up to him, bringing out a plate of rice without charging him. "Let me treat you to ham steak rice." That plate of ham steak rice shattered Azu, who was meant to last forever, and buried Zhu Mei, who had crossed the harbor every day to bring him meals. The world laments that Jin Yong's pen held the most devoted men under heaven. He made Guo Jing see only Huang Rong his entire life, and made young Guo wait 16 years in suffering. Yet it was he himself who, in his later years, declared before the camera with his own lips, "My view of love is immoral." Can someone who writes about undying devotion truly not understand loyalty? Or is it because they understand it too well that they realize ordinary people simply cannot resist the temptations of this chaotic world? He turned the martial arts world into a myth of ultimate passion and authenticity, yet lived his 3 marriages as battlegrounds littered with wreckage. This is not a piece of juicy gossip for people to chew over, nor is it meant to condemn anyone from some moral high ground. This is a tragedy of a dream maker devoured by reality itself. It's the true story of how an author who saw through the depths of human emotion used their pen to illuminate themselves, only to ultimately collapse and flee from it all. Welcome to Fanko Decodes. I'm Fanko. Today, we're not talking about the world of martial heroes. We're looking into the life of Leyi Cha, the man behind the myth. All answers to his destiny must be traced back to the very first time he put pen to paper to write martial arts fiction, and the real reason why he started writing in the first place. In 1957, the legend of the Condor heroes was serialized in the Hong Kong Commercial Daily. The first time Guo Jing met Huang Rong, she was disguised as a scruffy beggar sitting on the back of his horse. That night after they parted, Guo Jing stood on the grassland, looking up at the moon, with only one person in his mind. In all of Mongolia, there was only one Guo Jing. In the whole world, there was only one Huang Rong. When Jin Yong wrote about Guo Jing, he had already been married and divorced. He understood very clearly that what he wrote in his novels and what happened in real life were 2 completely different things. In 1947, Jin Yong was in Hangzhou. He was the chief editor of the humor supplement at the Southeast Daily News, his talent already beginning to show. At 23, handsome and refined, he wrote exceptionally well. That year, a young man named Du Yechu introduced his own sister to him. Her name was Du Jifen, 17 years old. Her father practiced medicine in Shanghai. The family was well off, and she had pleasant features. The two met, took notice of each other, and quickly grew close. That was the era just after the war had ended. Life still carried a lightness of having survived catastrophe. Jin Yong wrote articles, and Du Zhifen read them. When Du Zhifen's family hosted guests, Jin Yong would go. A writer and a girl who had grown up sheltered and protected, each felt the other came from a different world. In the fall of 1948, at Shanghai's Park Hotel, a wedding took place. For this marriage, Jin Yong did something special. He changed his pen name to Lin Huan. Lin Huan. The reason was simple. He took the wood radical from the character Jia, took the wood radical from the character Du, and two woods make Lin. Then he added the meaning of joy, of newlyweds. Lin Huan. What a beautiful name. At that time, Jin Yong was probably genuinely happy. After the wedding, the two came to Hong Kong. Life quickly revealed its true face. Du Zhifen didn't understand Cantonese and couldn't communicate with the outside world. Hong Kong was a strange island to her, and the language barrier deepened day after day. She grew up in Shanghai, where her father ran a medical clinic and the family lived comfortably. She'd been looked after her whole life, but when she came to Hong Kong, all of that was gone. Jin Yong threw himself into work all day long, coming home less and less. No language, no friends, no husband by her side. Loneliness isn't something that explodes. It just seeps in slowly, infiltrating every crack in a marriage, making everything rot from the inside out. In 1953, the marriage came to an end. Jin Yong published a divorce announcement in the newspaper. The stated reason was, wife unable to bear children. This was a lie. It was the last shred of dignity he preserved for her. Later, in 1998, when he was 74 and being interviewed by reporters, he told the truth. My first wife betrayed me. He used the English word, perhaps because saying it in Chinese was too painful. He never went into detail about what kind of betrayal it was. The most widespread version is that Du Zhifen gradually developed feelings for a director Jin Yong had introduced her to. Others say the root cause was her inability to endure the loneliness in Hong Kong. Her emotional departure happened long before her physical leaving. Whichever version is true, the outcome was the same. A marriage that walked out of the Shanghai International Hotel came to an end in Hong Kong. Two trees that once formed a forest, the joy of love was no more. Where did Jin Yong take that heartbreak? In 1955, at the age of 31, Jin Yong began writing his first martial arts novel, The Book and the Sword. 2 years later, the legend of the Condor heroes started its serialization. Guo Jing appeared, a man who would never waver in matters of the heart. Facing Huazeng, with Genghis Khan himself arranging the marriage, power and obligation weighing on his shoulders, yet in Guo Jing's heart, from beginning to end, there was only Huang Rong. Jin Yong later said, I deeply admire the character of Guo Jing and Xiao Feng. I reflect my ideals in my books. Guo Jing's unwavering devotion was Jin Yong's ideal, and that ideal came from what he had lost in reality. People always crave most what they don't have. During that period, there was another story about Jin Yong that he himself never publicly told in full. Around 1957, he made a decision that caught everyone by surprise. He resigned from Ta Kung Pao. Ta Kung Pao was a highly prestigious newspaper in Hong Kong, one of the most authoritative platforms in the Chinese news industry at the time. Quitting this job was equivalent to giving up an iron rice bowl. He quit anyway and went to Great Wall Film Company to work as a screenwriter. He never publicly stated his reasons, but those who knew him understood that Great Wall had an actress named Xia Meng. Xia Meng, born Yang Meng in 1933. She entered the entertainment industry in 1950, and in 1953, the period drama Flower in a Sea of Sin, in which she starred, was selected for the Edinburgh International Film Festival. She was called China's Hepburn and was Hong Kong's most sought-after leading actress at the time. Jin Yong's assessment of her remained consistent throughout his life. No one has ever seen how beautiful she was, but I imagine she must have looked like Xiaomeng to truly live up to her legendary reputation. To get closer to her, he gave up his iron rice bowl. Under the pen name Lin Huan, he worked at Great Wall for a full 3 years. He wrote screenplay after screenplay tailored specifically for her. The Peerless Beauty, Orchid Flower, Don't Leave Me, Three Loves, The Little Dove Girl, Midnight Piano. One after another, all featuring her. These scripts had one thing in common. Every story included a devoted man hopelessly in love with an unattainable woman. Later, he simply went to study directing and co-directed The Kingdom and the Beauty with Xiaomeng, just to have more reasons to be around her. He even named the male protagonist of The Book and the Sword after a photographer who was often around Xiaomeng, Chen Jialuo. Even a stranger's name, he wanted to quietly preserve a little trace of her presence. But there was one thing Jin Yong knew clearly from the very beginning. As early as 1954, Xiaomeng had already married businessman Lin Baocheng. The woman he was pursuing was a married woman. One evening, he asked her to meet at a cafe near the Haowang Temple in Kowloon, and during their conversation, he mustered up the courage to confess his feelings. Xiaomeng's answer was, "In this life, this wish cannot be fulfilled. Perhaps in the next life, there will still be a chance." These words were like a door, gently closing shut. After that, Jin Yong returned to his desk and continued writing his martial arts novels. In The Return of the Condor Heroes, there was a woman named Xiao Longnu, cool and aloof, ethereal and otherworldly, as if she'd stepped out of a painting belonging to no one and to no part of this mortal world. Critics say that was the shadow of Xia Moon. Ni Kuang said it straight out. Xiao Longnu is Xiaomeng. In 1966, Xiaomeng starred in her final film, Spring Blossoms, then announced her retirement from acting and moved to Canada. Jin Yong never wrote another screenplay for her. The man who wrote 6 screenplays apprenticed himself to learn directing and embedded a stranger's name into his male lead could only, in his novels, let those heroes continue to love. On October 30th, 2016, Xiaomeng passed away in Hong Kong. 2 years later, on October 30th, 2018, Jin Yong passed away in Hong Kong. Same month, same day. Whether this was coincidence or something else, no one could say for certain. But these 2 dates will forever fall on the same spot on the calendar, becoming a metaphor that cannot be explained and doesn't need to be explained. Guo Jing was his creation. Xiao Feng was his creation. Those men in his novels who never wavered in their devotion, they were all his creations. He gave all the most ideal love stories to the characters on paper. In his novels, he gave Guo Jing a Huang Rong who would never betray him. But reality had a different arrangement in store. A woman named Zhu Mei was waiting to make her entrance. On May 20th, 1959, Ming Pao was launched. First-day sales didn't even reach 1,000 copies. Jin Yong later recalled that period of time with a single word: miserable. On May 1st, 1956, Jin Yong married Zhu Mei. The wedding was held at Hong Kong's Miramar Hotel. The editor-in-chief of Ta Kung Pao, Fei Yimin, came. Friends from the journalism and film circles came too. It was quite lively. This wedding was much more impressive than his first one. Zhu Mei was born in 1935, graduated from the University of Hong Kong, came from a well-off family, and had worked as a reporter. She exuded talent and strength from her very core. Everyone who knew her would say the same thing. This woman was extraordinarily capable. When she married Jin Yong, her family's circumstances were better than his. In a sense, she was marrying down. No one knew what awaited her. Before founding Ming Pao, Jin Yong had worked at Ta Kung Pao for nearly 10 years. In 1959, he decided to resign and start his own newspaper. His business partner was his high school classmate, Xiaobao. Jin Yong put in 80,000 Hong Kong dollars. Xiaobao put in 20,000 Hong Kong dollars, and together they scraped up the seed money for Ming Pao. 100,000 Hong Kong dollars was no small sum in Hong Kong at that time. But for a newspaper, this amount of money was nowhere near enough. During the first 3 months after launch, they lost money every single month. Jin Yong took on freelance writing for the commercial daily to maintain cash flow, churning out 4,000 words a day, using his manuscript fees to plug the newspaper's financial holes. At that time, he was writing both martial arts novels and editorials simultaneously. The martial arts fiction to attract readers, the editorials to maintain his reputation. He couldn't afford to stop either one. An old employee at the newspaper later recalled, Mr. Cha was really struggling back then. When he got tired in the afternoon and ordered a cup of coffee, he and Mrs. Cha would share it between the two of them. 2 people sharing 1 cup of coffee. These 6 words say more than 1,000 words ever could. That Mrs. Cha, Zhu Mei, wasn't just someone sitting beside him taking a sip of coffee. She sold all the gold and silver jewelry from her dowry. The jewelry turned into the cash needed to keep the Ming Pao running. At the same time, she single-handedly took on almost everything at the newspaper. During the day, she'd go out covering stories. When she got back, she'd write the articles. After writing, she'd proofread them. After proofreading, she'd handle the layout. Back home, she'd cook meals and hold the children. In that era, it wasn't uncommon for Hong Kong women to work outside the home, but someone doing this much was extremely rare. Zhu Mei wasn't just a helper, she was the most important pillar in the entire newspaper office, second only to Jin Yong himself. A colleague, Dai Maosheng, later summed it up in one sentence. There's really nothing more to say. She handled every aspect of reporting single-handedly. I've never seen a woman work as hard as she did. Jin Yong himself wrote in an article many years later, My wife, Zhu Mei, cooked at our home in Kowloon every day and brought the food across to Hong Kong for me to eat. That line was his own admission. During those years, they had 4 children. Their eldest daughter, Cha Chuanxi, lost her hearing in both ears at age 5 due to a medical accident. She later moved to Canada and married a chief editor who came from Ming Pao. The eldest son, Cha Chuanxia, was Jin Yong's most beloved child. It's said he could recite the 3-character classic at age 3 and published an essay titled, What is My Life For? At 11. Jin Yong praised him as profound and precocious. The second son, Cha Chuanti, later studied under Kai Lan and became a culinary consultant in Shenzhen. The second daughter, Jia Chuan, Jin Yong named her with the meaning quick to act but slow to speak, saying she was his most beloved daughter. 4 children across 20 long years, Zhu Mei walked this path step by step, using her own strength to hold up the entire weight of this household. Ming Pao weathered its most difficult times. In 1961, the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber began its serialization in Ming Pao. Readers, eager to follow the story, walked into newsstands with coins in hand. Ming Pao started to turn a profit. In 1963, Jin Yong wrote Demigods and Semi-Devils, creating that line from Xiao Feng, Azu is Azu, I will never marry again in this lifetime. That year, Zhu Mei was still cooking meals in Kowloon and bringing them over every day. In his novel, he wrote for Xiao Feng the deepest vow in the world. Then he continued writing, continued running the newspaper, continued accepting the lunch she brought him. Year after year, the accumulation grew, and his influence expanded ever greater. By 1976, when Jin Yong divorced, Ming Pao's daily circulation had already reached the 100 to 1,000 level. Under its umbrella were Ming Pao Monthly, Ming Pao Weekly, and Ming Pao Evening News. Jin Yong's editorials were simultaneously read and studied by high-level political figures in Beijing, Taipei, and Hong Kong. In 1989, Jin Yong announced his resignation as publisher. At that time, Ming Pao was valued at over 1 billion Hong Kong dollars, with annual profits of approximately 100 million Hong Kong dollars. In 1991, Ming Pao Group went public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, with a market valuation of 7.8 to 8.700 million Hong Kong dollars. Jin Yong held a 60% stake. In 1959, Zhu Mei sold her jewelry and saved that newspaper. By 1976, that newspaper had become a cultural empire in Hong Kong. These 17 years were a journey from having nothing to having everything. But during those years, something quietly happened. The balance of power completely reversed. Two people sharing a cup of coffee was then editor-in-chief of Hong Kong's top newspaper. That's Now. In 1959, Zhu Mei had the power to save him. By 1976, Jin Yong no longer needed saving. Over these 20 years, Jin Yong wrote his martial arts novels, one after another. In 1957, Guo Jing said to Huang Rong, "No matter where I go, there's only ever been one person in my heart." In 1963, Xiao Feng said to Aju, "Aju is Aju, across all lands and nations, through 1,000 autumns and 10,000 generations, there is only one Aju. For the rest of my life, I will never marry again." In his novels, he gave all the most steadfast loyalty and devotion to those heroes. Readers were moved to tears. Zhu Mei would cook meals every day in Kowloon and bring them over. In 1971, Hong Kong passed the Marriage Reform Ordinance. From that year on, concubinage was officially abolished in Hong Kong, and monogamy became law. Before this, it was perfectly legal for wealthy Hong Kong Chinese businessmen to openly take concubines. The gambling king Stanley Ho had 4 wives and 17 children. That was normal for that era. Louis Cha chose not to take concubines. But his choice was a different approach. In that historical gap where old rules had just vanished and new values hadn't yet taken hold, he chose divorce and remarry. Illegal, but this meant Zhu Mei would be completely severed from this relationship, rather than coexisting with a label of concubine. That was a more absolute abandonment than taking a concubine. One day in 1966, Jin Yong walked into the Ritz restaurant in Quarry Bay. That year, he was 42 years old. The restaurant had a 16-year-old waitress. When she saw him push through the door, looking haggard and worn, she walked up to him and said, "Let me treat you to a ham steak rice." And so, the story entered a new chapter. Leyi later said that on that day, the way he walked through the door made her feel this person needed a meal. "Let me treat you to a ham steak rice." Jin Yong was stunned for a moment, sat down, and finished the meal. The next day, he brought a large doll to the shop and placed it in her hands. That was 1966. Jin Yong was 42 years old, and Leyi was 16 years old, born 26 years apart. Her parents had made their way to Hong Kong from Vietnam, their family fortune in decline, and at 16, she was already working as a waitress to support her household. No one knew that this plate of ham steak rice would intertwine two people's destinies together for half a century. Over the next 3 years, their relationship quietly developed. Jin Yong continued writing editorials, continued writing martial arts novels. Zhu Mei continued cooking every day in Kowloon and delivering the meals to Hong Kong. That was 1966 to 1969. Hong Kong was going through the most turbulent years in its history. Leftist riots, street bombs, political tension gripping everyone in fear. Jin Yong's editorials directly addressed the current situation. He was a public figure with positions to uphold, pressures to bear, and weariness to endure. Against this backdrop, a 16-year-old girl saying, "Let me treat you to ham steak rice." That kind of lightness was probably something he couldn't get anywhere else. On the 24th of October, 1969, The Deer and the Cauldron began its serialization in Mingpao. The protagonist of this novel was named Xiaobao. In all martial arts novels before Jin Yong, the protagonists were heroes. They could sacrifice personal feelings for righteousness, give up the world for one person, loyal, devoted. He has principles and boundaries. Xiaobao doesn't. He was a street hustler who grew up in a brothel, knew no martial arts, and relied on lies, luck, and emotional intelligence to thrive spectacularly in the world of rivers and lakes. He eventually married 7 wives. 7. Among these 7 women, Xiaobao himself knew perfectly well who he truly loved. It was Shuang-er. Only Shuang-er was the one he chose from the very beginning, not forced, not for gain, not by luck. He had once calculated something in his mind. If one day he truly reached a dead end and had to take a wife with him to die, which one would it be? Shuang-er would definitely come with me. He thought about it some more. The princess, sorry, but she's not invited. As for the other 5, we'd have to roll the dice. This remark was half in jest, yet it was Xiaobao's most clear-headed moment in the entire book. He knew which relationship was real. He also knew which one wasn't. He just didn't let go of either one. Jin Yong later wrote in the postscript of The Deer and the Cauldron, some readers were dissatisfied with The Deer and the Cauldron because of the protagonist Xiaobao's moral character. It goes too much against conventional values. Readers of martial arts novels are used to putting themselves in the shoes of the hero in the book, but Xiaobao is someone you can't step into. In this regard, I've deprived certain readers of some pleasure, and for that, I apologize. An apology. This was one of Jin Yong's rare formal apologies to his readers. He said Xiaobao was a critique of feudal society. He said Xiaobao represented the person most adaptable to a despotic era, not necessarily the person with the highest morals. These interpretations have their depth and their merits, but the timeline doesn't lie. When The Deer and the Cauldron was serialized, it was from 1969 to 1972. During those 3 years, Jin Yong's relationship with Leyi had already been going on for a full 3 years. His marriage to Zhu Mei had not yet officially ended. He was writing about a man who knew who he truly loved, yet was simultaneously juggling 7 relationships. And at that time, he himself was going through the exact same situation. This isn't conclusive evidence. Jin Yong himself never directly linked Xiaobao to his own private life, but mirrors never speak. It just reflects what's there. Zhu Mei eventually found out. She discovered that Jin Yong had stopped coming to the newspaper office and was having someone else deliver his manuscripts. She checked the address and traced it to Happy Valley. She saw it with her own eyes. After that, she approached Ni Kuang and asked him to act as an intermediary to persuade Jin Yong to come back. Ni Kuang and Luisha were old friends of many years. They'd drink and chat together. Their relationship was excellent. This time, Ni Kuang said something along the lines of, "What's the big deal about having 2 wives?" Zhu Mei picked up a broom and swept Ni Kuang right out of the house. "I will not accept 2 wives." Those words, crystal clear. No room for negotiation. That was a Hong Kong woman of the 1960s. A woman who had personally helped prop up Ming Pao from within the newspaper office. When she said those words, she didn't cry, she didn't beg, just a broom and 1 sentence. Jin Yong tore up the divorce papers. It said that he regretted it at that moment, wanted to reconcile, tore up the divorce agreement, and didn't want the divorce anymore. Zhu Mei said, "There's no turning back, just those 5 words." She was no longer the woman from 1959 who had sold her jewelry to save the newspaper. It's not that she stopped loving him, but rather she decided not to continue loving him under these circumstances. On September 23, 1972, The Deer and the Cauldron finished its serialization. Jin Yong announced his retirement from writing. He began his martial arts world with Guo Jing and ended it with Wei Xiaobao. From Guo Jing to Wei Xiaobao represents the complete evolution of Jin Yong's creative philosophy, from reflecting ideals in his books to diagnosing reality in his books. In his first hero, he wrote down what he wanted to become. In his final protagonist, he wrote down what he himself was perhaps closer to being. 1976. Jin Yong was 52 years old. That year, 3 things happened all at once. Any one of them would be enough to break a person completely. At the divorce negotiation table in 1976, Zhu Mei put forward 2 conditions. First, Jin Yong must provide financial compensation. Second, Leyi must undergo sterilization surgery before she could marry Jin Yong. Jin Yong accepted. Both conditions fully accepted. Leyi was 26 years old. To marry Jin Yong, she underwent the surgery. From that point on, she could never bear children again. She would remain childless for the rest of her life. This was the price she paid to enter this marriage, written in the contract, signed, irrevocable. Why did Zhu Mei propose this condition? She sold her jewelry, saved the newspaper, bore 4 children, and cooked meals every day to bring over from Kowloon. She gave this marriage everything she had. Now, she couldn't stop this marriage from ending, but she demanded one thing: that woman to never be able to leave behind her bloodline in this family. It was a request that couldn't be spoken aloud, and also a quiet response that no one could refute. Later, someone asked Leyi if she had any regrets. She never gave a clear answer. The divorce was finalized. But the year 1976 wasn't over yet. In October 1976, news arrived from the United States. Chachuan Xia, the eldest son of Jin Yong and Zhu Mei, had taken his own life by hanging in his dormitory at Columbia University. He was 19 years old that year. Chachuan Xia was Jin Yong's most beloved child. At 3 years old, he recited the 3-character classic. At 11, he wrote an essay titled, "What is my life for?" In that piece, there was already a sense of emptiness and questioning. Jin Yong praised him at the time, calling him profound and precocious. Little did he know that wasn't profundity. It was a child sending a signal to his father, a signal the father failed to understand. There are 2 theories about why Chachuan Xia took his own life. One account says he had an argument during a phone call with his girlfriend in San Francisco, and that same day ended his life with a rope in his dormitory. Another version says his parents' divorce was the root cause. He had reportedly written letters and made phone calls multiple times, pleading with his father not to go through with the divorce. He exhausted every method a 19-year-old could think of, but no one listened. No one knows which version is closer to the truth. Perhaps both are true. When Jin Yong heard the news, he nearly collapsed. He later said, "This was like a bolt from the blue for me. I was so heartbroken that I almost wanted to follow him in suicide myself." At that moment, there was one burning question. Why would he take his own life? Why would he suddenly abandon life itself? I wanted to go to the underworld, to meet with Chuanxia, to have him explain this question to me. That day, when the terrible news arrived, he still had to go to the newspaper office to write his editorial. He would write a passage, then weep, write another passage, then weep again, but he never stopped. He had to keep going. This scene is what many who knew him would later recall in different occasions, that father on that very day, still sitting in his chair at the newspaper office, crying as he worked, while finishing the article he had to submit that day. Years later, when revising The Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber, he wrote this passage in the afterword. Zhang Sanfeng's grief. Upon witnessing Zhang Quishan's suicide, the grief of Xie when he heard the news of Zhang Wuji's death, these were written far too superficially in the book. That's not how real life works. Because back then, I didn't understand yet. I didn't understand back then. This sentence, written in Jin Yong's own hand, represents the most profound revision he ever made to his past work. He finally understood what it meant to lose someone. The cost was losing his son. After that, Jin Yong began studying scriptures. First, he read the Christian Bible, but found no comfort. Then, he turned to Buddhism. Starting with the Samyukta Agama, the Madhyama Agama, and the Dirgha Agama, he read through them volume by volume. It's said that he taught himself Sanskrit for this purpose, and wrote tens of thousands of words in study notes. This wasn't leisure, nor was it escapism. He was someone who took things seriously to the extreme. When he wrote martial arts novels, he studied history. When he wrote social commentaries, he studied politics. And now that he wanted to understand death, he earnestly went to read books about understanding death. A year and a half later, he read a certain passage and suddenly understood something. He later described that moment. The truth is right here. It must be this way. So that's how it is. I finally understand. His heart filled with joy. From his son's passing to finding inner peace. It took him about a year and a half. That year, there was one more thing. At the end of 1976, Jin Yong and Leyi officially got married. There was no wedding ceremony. The two lived together discreetly, with virtually no public ceremony whatsoever. This stood in the sharpest contrast to the wedding in 1956, when he and Zhu Mei celebrated at the Meilihua Hotel with great fanfare and excitement. Fei Yimin, the publisher of Ta Kung Pao, came. Friends from the press and film circles all came. This time, there was nothing. In that year, the divorce papers had just been signed. The devastating news about his son had just settled, and Buddhist scriptures were still being turned page by page at night, when they, just like that, quietly came together. No flowers, no guests, no ceremony. And just like that, 1976 passed. Jin Yong turned 52, having made it through that year. 3 events: divorce, the loss of his son, remarriage, same year, same month, all overlapping together. In this 1 year, he completely settled accounts with his past and completely lost something as well. He had written about Xiao Feng's tragedy in his novel. The line, "promises of cattle and sheep on the frontier, all in vain," that single word, "in vain," carries the weightiest meaning in all of Jin Yong's works. Xiao Feng accidentally killed Zhu, and from that moment on, he never married again, atoning for his sin with his death. But that was a character in a novel. In 1976, Louis Xia found himself in an equally irreparable situation. But he wasn't Xiao Feng. He didn't atone with his life. He chose to keep living, to keep moving forward, carrying those irreparable things with him as he continued on. Divorced, son, gone. Buddhist scriptures, understood. Jin Yong continued living, moving forward. And Zhu Mei, she moved alone into a tenement building in Wanchai. After the divorce in 1976, Zhu Mei moved alone into a tenement building in Wanchai. From being one of the founders of Mingpao to living in a Wanchai tenement building, it didn't happen overnight. But looking back, the distance really was that vast. Those years, Zhu Mei's life didn't go smoothly. After the divorce, she made some business investments, which reportedly didn't go well, leaving her with debts. Hong Kong newspapers occasionally mentioned her, with eyewitnesses claiming they'd seen her selling handbags from a street stall in Causeway Bay. When asked about this, Jin Yong said, "It wouldn't come to that. Perhaps it wouldn't. Perhaps. Maybe he just didn't want to believe it. Or perhaps didn't want to admit that the woman who once sold her jewelry to save his newspaper had ended up living like that in the years that followed." Both possibilities were true. Zhu Mei did make some efforts after the divorce. She had a degree from the University of Hong Kong, worked as a journalist, spent nearly 20 years at Mingpao, doing everything from interviewing to writing, proofreading to typesetting. She wasn't someone without abilities, but Hong Kong in 1976 wasn't exactly a welcoming place for a middle-aged single woman. Business failures, drowning in debt. The woman who was once at the core of Mingpao, in the eyes of outsiders, quickly became just Jin Yong's ex-wife. He tried to make amends. He tried to send her money. Zhu Mei refused. He sent their son to visit her, to express his apologies on his behalf. Zhu Mei refused that too. She preferred to be independent. That was the explanation Jin Yong gave later on. Brief, calm, like a statement he'd repeated many times and finally come to accept. He publicly expressed that sense of guilt on more than one occasion. To CCTV host Bai Yan Song, he said, "As a husband, I wasn't very successful because I got divorced, and the wife I divorced, I feel I wronged her in my heart. She has passed away now, and I'm deeply saddened by it." Facing the reporter's camera, he said, "I'm sorry to Zhu Mei," with a look of guilt on his face. In another interview, he said, "This whole thing was my fault. I let her down, so I've carried a lot of guilt and regret inside. I kept trying to get close to her, wanting to help her, but she refused." He also said this, "My conscience is clear. Whether it's friends or children, I feel I've done right by them all. I don't think I've done anything bad. The only thing that troubles my conscience is that I had an affair after marrying my wife. I wronged her. That matter is in the past now, and there's no way to make amends." These 5 words, "no way to make up for it," were spoken with complete clarity. He admitted it, he regretted it, he tried to make amends, and time and again he said in public, "I've wronged Zhu Mei." All of this was true. But there's also something else that's true. Zhu Mei didn't forgive him just because he admitted his wrongs. She didn't accept his money just because he expressed regret. She didn't let the visits from his son through the door just because he publicly stated his position again and again. Both things were true at the same time. On the 8th of November 1998, Zhu Mei passed away at Ruttenji Hospital in Wanchai. The cause of death was disseminated tuberculosis. She was 63 years old. In that era, 63 wasn't considered old, but her body had perhaps long begun to deteriorate. The death certificate was handled by hospital staff, not by her ex-husband, not by her children. The hospital placed a missing persons notice in the newspaper, searching for family members. No one responded. That year, Louis Xia was 74. He lived in his Hong Kong mansion with Leyi by his side. 32 years had passed since they first met. This was the final page of Zhu Mei's story. Selling her jewelry to save the newspaper cooking meals in Kowloon every day and bringing them to Hong Kong, single-handedly shouldering the children, the interviews, and the typesetting. These were all things she had done. Divorce, living alone, refusing money, refusing visits, dying alone in a hospital. This was also her ending. She held that newspaper together through Ming Pao's darkest years. Yet she didn't get to enjoy even a corner of the glory during Ming Pao's most brilliant era. Jin Yong's guilt was real. His sadness was real too. But there was one thing he failed to do while Zhu Mei was still alive. He never managed to deliver that sorrow to her in a way she would have accepted. What Zhu Mei needed wasn't his money, wasn't his apology, wasn't visits from his son. What she needed was something else entirely. That thing had already vanished long before 1976. She ultimately completed her own ending in a thorough way, pushing away every offer of reconciliation that came her way. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't resentment, but rather a quieter, more complete withdrawal. A woman using dignity as her shield, blocking all apologies and attempts at redemption outside her door. This is a period far heavier than any accusation. Because accusation at least requires the other person to exist. But her refusal meant she no longer needed him at all. Next, only one question remained. What kind of person was Jin Yong really? In his later years, Cha Lung-yung laid down all his martial prowess and defenses before the camera and spoke words that sounded like a confession. My view of love is immoral. Pay attention to the wording of this statement. Not, I don't understand. Not, I'm not wrong, but rather, it should be one person for a lifetime, but I can't do it. Coming back to the question we raised at the beginning, did the person who created Guo Jing truly not know how to be devoted? Quite the opposite. It's precisely because he understood it too well that he felt afraid. Jin Yong's 3 marriages conceal a creator's most brutal dissection of himself. His entire life was spent using the deep affection in his writing to fill the voids and fight against the imperfections of reality. In 1957, he had just been through his first wife's betrayal, and Xiao Feng, the woman he secretly loved, had married someone else. At the moment when he most craved loyalty, he created on paper a Guo Jing who would never waver. Guo Jing was the god he wanted to become but could never be. In 1963, Zhu Mei crossed the sea every day to bring him meals, a kindness as heavy as a mountain. While enjoying this unconditional devotion, he felt deeply grateful, and so he had Xiao Feng make the greatest vow in all the land, never to take another wife in this lifetime. That was a monument he erected for himself at the pinnacle of morality, until 1969, when Xiaobao entered the scene. By then, he had been carrying on a secret affair with Leyi for 3 years, and his marriage to Zhu Mei existed in name only. He finally put down on paper a scoundrel who juggled 7 women, wanting both true love and worldly success. Xiaobao was the mirror he finally held up after abandoning all resistance. From Guo Jing's sacred temple to Xiaobao's marketplace, this wasn't the degradation of a writer. This was a dreamweaver who had seen through the mortal world, delivering a heavy blow to himself. He stopped pretending. He finally admitted that in the end, he couldn't resist the temptations of this turbulent mortal world and the darkness of human nature. This is the answer to that question. Why did a man who wrote ideals for men with his pen end up living a completely different way in reality? Because the hero is meant to be looked up to, while the human is bound to fall. Looking at the women who remained in his life, each one confirms the karmic cycle of fate. Leyi won a marriage that lasted 42 years and cashed in on a mansion worth 200 million Hong Kong dollars after Jin Yong's death. But at the age of 26, she signed a sterilization agreement, remaining childless for life, forfeiting the natural joy of motherhood and family. Zhu Mei was stripped of her right to share in the glory of the Hong Kong newspaper empire, but with her fierce resolve to never see him again and refuse every penny, made Jin Yong carry a cross for the rest of his life. He apologized to the whole world, but could never again knock open the door of that Wan Chai tenement building. In all the martial arts of this world, nothing is more unfathomable than the two words, destiny. End. On October 30th, 2016, Xia Meng, the woman who had once told him this wish cannot be fulfilled in this lifetime, passed away in Hong Kong. 2 years later, on the same date, October 30th, 2018, Jin Yong took his final breath. The young man who once stuffed a stranger's name into a book just to feel closer to her, ultimately came to rest in the same square on the calendar, sharing a distant tomb with her across time and space. This isn't romance, this is fate's silent sneer. We finally understand that afternoon's ham-chop rice. In 1966, when the 4-2-year-old Jin Yong gulped down the hot meal brought to him by that 16-year-old girl, he knew perfectly well in his heart that back at home in Kowloon, there was still a pot of warm soup waiting for him at home, but he ate that bowl of rice anyway. He used martial arts fiction to escape the dullness of reality, and used real-life stolen pleasures to escape the heavy burden of morality. Jin Yong used his 94 years to demonstrate to everyone a cruel yet true reality, that extreme devotion and extreme callousness, it turns out they can coexist in one person's very bones and blood. He built the purest realm of rivers and lakes, solely to shelter his heart that was covered in the mud of reality. The snow has fallen without a trace, and the world of martial heroes now lies far in the distance. Whenever we turn those stirring pages, perhaps we can all hear an old man's long sigh behind the words, promises made about cattle and sheep beyond the frontier, all in vain. In this world, in the end, there are no fairy tales. Finally, there's one question I'd like to hear your thoughts on. So Zhu Mei used one phrase, "there's no turning back," and made Jin Yong tear up the divorce papers. Then she closed that door, and for 20 years, she never opened it again. I've been wondering, behind that door that never opened, what was she guarding? Was it her hatred for him? Or was it the only dignity in her entire life that she never compromised on? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Fanko, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore these fleeting lives.